بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبو القاسم محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. The Holy Prophet ﷺ said to a group of people, "Certainly what I fear for you most is the lesser shirk." Shirk meaning polytheism. Someone asked, "O Prophet, what do you mean by the lesser shirk?" He replied, "It is Riya." When Allah would reward His creatures for their deeds on the Day of Judgment, He would address those who committed Riya, saying, "Go approach those whom you did all these good deeds for in the world to please them." In other words, all these people that you spent your whole life doing the good deeds for the sake of pleasing them, go get your rewards for your deeds from them. And what reward can people give you on the Day of Judgment? Nothing. They're in the same situation as you. Before we delve deeper into... that's right. Before we delve deeper into this topic of Riya, first I want to briefly talk about spiritual diseases and the importance of intention. Most of us are quite familiar with physical health. To maintain a healthy, functioning body, we know less we purify ourselves from spiritual diseases like Riya. Imam Ali alayhi salam says in Barakah. Sorry, I'm just reading this slide. Beware, one of the calamities is hunger, and worse than that is physical sickness. More terrible than physical sickness is the sickness of the heart. In other words, the spiritual heart. And beware, one of the bounties is wealth, and better than wealth is physical health, but more preferable than physical health is the piety of the heart. Sorry, just 1 second, technical difficulties. Talking about the Day of Judgment, where he says, "It is the day on which property or wealth will not avail, nor sons." In other words, property and wealth and all these things that we gain in this world will have no value except him who comes to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala biqalbun salim, with a heart free from evil or a sincere heart. In other words, both this narration and the verse from the Quran reinforce that ultimately the most important thing for us to focus on in this life is our spiritual health, because that's all that matters at the end of the day, on the Day of Judgment. The second point is about intention. How important is intention? Is intention more important than the action? Is the action more important than the intention? Are they equally important? The Holy Prophet ﷺ said, "A believer's intention is better than his deed, and a denier's intention is worse than his deed." Intention is extremely important. Generally speaking, if I perform an action with a good and sincere intention, and it turns out to have a bad outcome, it's still not considered a bad action. But if I perform the greatest of actions with a bad intention, not only is the action invalidated and become nothing, it becomes a bad action, and in some cases, a sin. Take, for example, imagine an aspiring politician donates $1 million to a poor community. It's a great action. But if his sole intention is to deceive the community into thinking that he is kind and generous and he cares about them when really he doesn't, all he wants to do is appeal to them so that he can get the votes and get elected into power. Is this still a good action?
No.
Ahsant. So we find that intention is almost the criteria that determines whether an action is good or bad. It affects the quality of the action. In fact, intention on its own is a good deed. Imam Sadiq alayhi salam said, "A good deed will be recorded in favor of anyone who decides to do something good, fails to do so. On top of that, sometimes an intention on its own is as good as the intention and the action. The Holy Prophet ﷺ said, anyone who out of sincerity and uprightness prays for martyrdom, Allah will include him in the company of martyrs on the day of resurrection, even if he dies in bed. Now that we've established the importance of intention, question, what is the best intention? What is the best intention when doing anything? Is it to gain happiness? Is it to benefit myself in some way? Is it to gain pleasure? Is it to gain profit, income? According to our religious teachings, the best intention to have when doing anything is to do things for the sake of gaining nearness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, getting closer to God, or for the sake of pleasing God. But there are different classifications of actions and deeds. You have the general worldly deeds, like cleaning the floor, washing the dishes, and then you have religious acts or acts of worship. If I'm just cleaning the floor, doing just the general worldly deed, does my intention have to be for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for it to be a good action? Some scholars say, no, it doesn't. It just has to be a good moral intention. For example, I'm cleaning the floor because I want to create a hygienic environment for myself and my family. That's a good moral intention. Of course, it's always better to do it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, always. But for these worldly actions, some scholars say it just has to be a good moral intention. What about acts of worship? Like salat, hajj, fasting, sadaqah, giving charity, and so on. Can my intention be as flexible? Can I do my salat with an intention other than to worship Allah, other than to gain closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Would my worship still be valid?
No.
Ahsan is answering all these questions, mashallah. Am I still worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if my intention is other than Allah? So, one of the bad intentions that we can have that compromises our actions is riya. What exactly is riya? Riya is loosely translated to ostentation in English, and in the general context, it means to show off. In a religious context, we can define it as showing off or pretending to be pious, good-natured, or a true believer. In other words, pretending to be religious or showing off your religiosity in front of people for the sake of getting their praise, getting their admiration, and getting their respect, and having a good reputation among them. In other words, rather than worshipping and spending all this time and effort, gaining our religious knowledge, struggling and doing all these things for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and strengthening that connection with Allah, we do it all for the sake of pleasing the people and being praised by the people. This is riya. Why is riya a problem? Actually, before I go on to this, there's a story I want to share with you. There's a story that's commonly told when teaching people about riya. The story goes that there's a man who went to the mosque to pray all night. When he goes to the mosque and he's halfway through his prayer, he senses someone walking into the mosque. Now that there's someone watching him, suddenly he becomes very motivated and enthusiastic, and he decides he's going to continue worshipping till the morning. So he continues worshipping till the morning, finishes his worship, turns around and he sees a dog. He realizes this whole time it wasn't a person that walked in, it was a dog just looking for a place to sleep. So this whole time he was worshipping to please a dog. Imagine how silly that is, whether it was a dog or a human being. How silly is it that we waste all this worship and time to please a dog or a human being? It's very silly. So why is riya a problem? Going back to this example, if my intention when praying is to please this dog or to please this human, I'm not worshipping Allah anymore. I'm worshipping whatever it is I'm trying to please. So it becomes an act of shirk, of polytheism, because I've taken another God to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In fact, even if 95% of my intention is to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when praying, and 5% is to look good in front of the people, that's still shirk. It's like you're taking two gods. One God is Allah and one God is the people. So the first problem with Riya is that our good deeds are turned into bad deeds, and our acts of worship become polytheism. They become an act of polytheism, acts of shirk. And shirk is no ordinary sin. Imam al-Sadiq, before we go on to that, Imam al-Sadiq says, Riya in any of its forms amounts to shirk. Verily one who works for the people, his reward lies with them, and one who works for Allah, his reward lies with Allah. As I was saying, shirk is no ordinary sin. Another hadith from Imam al-Sadiq, he says, the greatest of the greatest sins is to attribute partners to Allah. So shirk is pretty much the worst type of sin that you can commit. And greater sins are a type of sin where if you don't repent for them in your life before you die, you are not forgiven for them on the day of judgment. You cannot be forgiven for them. You have to be punished. So we have to take this very seriously. It's not a very small thing, this Riya business. Second problem with Riya is that it's often hidden and it happens subconsciously. I think this is the most challenging aspect of dealing with Riya. Most of the time we think that we're doing things sincerely and for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And inshallah this doesn't apply to us, but sometimes if we dig really deep into what is really motivating us deep down, we find sometimes it's actually the praise that we get from people. We don't really care deep down about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imam al-Askari alayhi salam said, the penetration of polytheism in the works of man is more subtle than the movement of an ant on a dark night on a black rock. Imagine trying to see an ant moving in the middle of the night on a dark rock. That is how subtle shirk is, and Riya is a type of shirk, which this hadith certainly applies to. So it's very difficult to realize within ourselves that we are committing Riya. The third problem with Riya, if we continue to have these false intentions for the sake of showing off and we don't deal with this problem, it will eventually lead a person to becoming a hypocrite, a munafiq. If you think about what's happening when you do Riya, you're displaying yourself to be religious. You're not doing it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so you're not benefiting from the action. So your religiosity is not improving. In fact, it's getting worse. But the more and more you do, the more you look like the more you pretend that you're religious. So in a way, it's a hypocritical action. And if you let it go on and on and on, you start to literally do things for the sake of deceiving people. So you become a munafiq, you become a hypocrite. And hypocrites are severely punished and forsaken by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There are many verses in the Quran that talk about the punishments of hypocrites. One such verse says, Allah has promised the hypocrite men and the hypocrite women and the infidels the fire of hell to abide in it forever. That is enough for them. Allah has cursed them, and for them is a lasting chastisement. And may Allah protect us from ever becoming hypocrites. But we have to realize that Riya, if unaddressed, can lead us to becoming hypocrites. So we have to give it a lot of importance. So we've covered the definition of Riya and why Riya is a problem. Now we need to talk about what Riya looks like so we can try and identify it if we are committing it. Imam al-Sadiq narrates from Imam Ali alayhi salam, there are three distinguishing features of one accustomed to Riya. Number one, he expresses joy and cheerfulness in the excessive kind when he is greeted by people. Number two, he becomes cheerless and sullen, in other words, becomes depressed and down when he's alone. And number three, he wishes to be praised for everything he does. Now let's take a look at some specific examples in the religious context. Number one, growing a beard for the brothers is the mustahab act. It's a recommended act, if done for the right reasons. But if our intention in growing this beard and making it long and pretty and everything is just to look cool in front of people or to look religious, this becomes RIYA. Praying differently when we're in public versus in private. Unfortunately, sometimes when we're at home praying alone, we rush through our prayers. Then when we're at the mosque in front of people and people are watching us, suddenly we start taking our time, we pray very slowly, suddenly we perfect our salat. You have to ask yourself, why is my behavior changing from one setting to another? Allah can see me whether I'm alone or with people. So if I'm doing it for the sake of Allah, it shouldn't matter. But the fact that my behavior is changing when people are suddenly in the equation suggests that my real intention is, or my preference is to please the people more than pleasing Allah. Therefore it becomes RIYA. Studying religion, sometimes when we gain a lot of knowledge, some of us even go to Hawza, inshallah, and we may even come back and preach. Suddenly we become very arrogant. We start wanting to preach, to show off our knowledge and impress people. We want to become a famous speaker, a famous preacher, instead of doing it for the sake of Allah and bringing people to the religion and benefiting ourselves from the knowledge as well. If our intention becomes to show off and be praised by the people, again it becomes RIYA. When we go to Hajj or Ziyarah, sometimes we come back and we put pictures on social media. This is not a problem if I put pictures on social media for the sake of attracting people to the religion for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's not an issue. But if I put those pictures on social media to show off that, hey, look, I went to Hajj, I went to Ziyarah, look at me, I'm religious, and get those likes, it becomes an act of RIYA. Reciting Quran in a beautiful voice, especially in a congregation like this, one of the best acts, brings you closer to Allah as the reciter, and it brings everyone listening closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if done with the right intention. But if I practice my voice and perfect it and I come and recite here purely for the sake of impressing the people and becoming a famous reciter and gaining that praise and showing off my voice, it becomes RIYA. There are also examples of RIYA in the Holy Quran. One such example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, O you who have believed, do not invalidate your charities with reminders or injury, as does one who spends his wealth only to be seen by the people and does not believe in Allah and the last day. And it goes on to say, they are unable to keep anything of what they have earned, and Allah does not guide the disbelieving people. In other words, example of RIYA when giving charity or spending money in the way of Allah, except you're not doing it in the way of Allah, you're doing it for the sake of being seen by others and being seen as generous and pious. Does RIYA only apply in religious context? No, it applies in everything we do. In the worldly context, some examples, going to the gym. We go to the gym not to get fit, not to become healthy, because it's good for our health. We do it to grow our muscles and perfect our physique so we can go and show that off to people. This becomes RIYA. Sometimes we don't have a lot of money, but when we buy clothes, we pay 10 times for a jacket so we can get that particular brand, that expensive brand, Versace or whatever it is these days. Why? Why are you spending more than what you're capable of to buy those expensive brands? Maybe it suggests that you want to show off, you want to impress people. If you're doing this purely for the sake of impressing people, so they can say, oh, look at you, mashallah, you're wealthy, he's wearing these expensive gadgets and gear, this becomes RIYA. Changing our way of thinking and behavior to please groups of people. Unfortunately, some groups of people expect you to change everything you believe in and your way of thinking to assimilate. To some degree, assimilating is not a problem if you can do it without breaking the boundaries of Islam, without exceeding the boundaries that Allah has set. to be halal, haram, good and bad. But often we find ourselves compromising on these boundaries, compromising on our beliefs, so we can fit in, so we can please certain groups of people. If I'm more interested in pleasing these groups of people at the cost of displeasing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then I've taken these people as my God more than Allah. This becomes RIYA. The final question that we need to discuss is, okay, we've identified RIYA as a problem, we've identified what it looks like, how do we deal with it? How do we cure ourselves from RIYA? Number one, I think personally that we need to study it. If you study RIYA, then you know what it looks like and you can learn how to recognize it within yourself, if it happens. Number two, this is a critical step. The hardest thing about RIYA, as I've already mentioned, is realizing that you're actually doing it. It's very hidden and subconscious. You have to dig really deep into your intention to realize if you're doing it or not. One way to do that is to monitor the way you behave and the way you react in different situations and scrutinize yourself, judge yourself, be very critical of yourself. We already gave the example of praying differently in one situation versus another. You have to reflect, why am I behaving differently in two different situations? Another example could be you do a good deed that no one knows about, and suddenly you have the urge to just tell everyone about it. You ever notice that sometimes when you do something good, you just have this urge to tell everyone about it? If you did it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, why do you want to tell people about it? You got to ask yourself, why do I have this desire to tell people about it? Maybe it suggests that I crave that attention from people. Maybe it suggests that my intention all along was RIYA. Another example could be when giving charity. If I have the option to do it anonymously, and I have the option to do it in front of people where I get praise in front of everyone, and I choose the option of doing it in public, why did I do that? Why do I prefer that option over doing it anonymously if I have both options? Again, you've got to ask yourself, you've got to dig deep, think about, why is my choice this? Why am I behaving this way? Does it suggest that my real intention is different? Number three, inshallah this doesn't apply to us, but if we identify that maybe we're committing RIYA, the first thing we need to do, and the most important thing, is to pray and ask Allah for help. And ask for forgiveness if we've committed it. When we develop that one-on-one relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when we humble ourselves and ask for help, it strengthens our sincerity. And sincerity is acting in an opposing way to RIYA. So this is a very powerful first step. Humble yourself before Allah. Realize that you are nothing without Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You cannot succeed in anything unless Allah helps you. You're not capable of doing it yourself. So you need to humble yourself before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and ask for help. Number four, one of the root causes of RIYA is too much love of this material world, too much attachment to this dunya. That's why you crave the praise from the people so much. And this is a general thing that we have to do. We have to work on reducing our attachment to this world and focus on the hereafter. Number five, actively reject the whispers of shaitan. Every time you do a good deed, shaitan will tell you, go and tell everyone about it. You're going to reject this. You're going to say, no, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to keep it a secret. Or for example, you're practicing your voice to recite Quran for the majlis. Shaitan whispers into your head, yeah, practice your voice, so your voice is beautiful, so people are impressed by your voice. You're going to reject that thought. You're going to say, no, I'm going to practice my voice, I'm going to recite Quran, but I'm not going to do it to impress the people. I'm going to do it to impress Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Every time you reject those thoughts that come in, you strengthen that willpower, and that willpower helps you control and deal with these spiritual diseases like RIYA. Number five, practice minimizing RIYA if possible. Sometimes we're in situations where we have two different options. One option is less likely to have or be contaminated with riyā. Another option is more likely to tempt us to do riyā. Charity is a common example that is given. If I can give charity anonymously, if I can give charity publicly, obviously I'll do it anonymously because there's less chance that I'll commit riyā if no one knows about it. There's less chance that I'll be motivated. How can I please people if no one knows that I'm doing it? And another example that we gave before as well, when you do your deeds, you do something and no one knows about it, keep it a secret. You don't need to tell people that you did something good. Number 7, consider the fact that all your efforts are wasted when you commit riyā. Everything you've done, all that struggle, all that work, all that preparation goes to waste just with a false intention. And not only that, if it's a religious act, it becomes a sin, as we talked about. And if it keeps going, you can become a hypocrite, and your punishment is basically eternal hellfire. Is it worth it? What are you getting out of it? You don't get anything out of it, and in return you get nothing but misery and punishment. Number 8, realize that the reward from people is nothing, while the reward from Allah is great. Ahsant. Bigger than huge, man. What can people give you? They can't give you anything, as we already talked about in the hadith. On the Day of Judgment, you'll be expected to get your rewards from the people if you commit riyā. What are people going to give you on the Day of Judgment? Nothing. What are they going to give you in this world? Nothing. Everything belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Everything comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what are you going to get out of committing riyā?
Nothing.
Nothing. Ahsant. There's a beautiful narration from Mouhamed Reslan that goes further into this. Mouhamed Reslan alayhi salam said, if one intends to do a small act with the sole intention of pleasing Allah, Allah causes a small deed of his to be manifested on a greater scale upon the people. In other words, you do something tiny, but with a sincere intention for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah makes it huge in the eyes of the people. On the contrary, if someone performs the greatest of deeds, which cause him physical tiredness and exhaustion due to wakeful nights, while his intention had been to acquire the praise of people, in other words, commit riyā, his deed will be reduced to a trifle, reduced to nothing by Allah, and manifested on the people in the sense that people will see through you and they'll realize you're showing off and they'll start to dislike you. Come in. So even that temporary pleasure that you thought you're going to get from getting that praise of the people by showing off, you won't even get that. Allah is telling you, He will make it look like nothing in the eyes of people, and people will see through you sooner or later. People can always see through someone who's showing off and his intention is not sincere. So you literally get nothing out of committing riyā, which is why, in my personal opinion, I think the most difficult part is just realizing that you're doing it. It's not so much that we know we're doing it and it's very tempting, because there's literally nothing that you get out of it. The final 2 points that I want to leave you with before we end this talk. Beware of the tricks of shaitan. When you're at the stage where you identify what riyā looks like and you realize that you might be committing it, you've overcome the biggest obstacle. The biggest obstacle is realizing you've done it. Once you know you've done it, you're 90% of the way there. Because now, every time you're about to do something, all you have to do is just reflect a little bit and you can realize, okay, no, it looks like my intention is riyā, let me correct it. It's not hidden anymore, right? So shaitan has to change his tactics. He can't hide it from you anymore. He takes a different approach. He starts to pretend he's on your side. And he'll tell you, listen, brother, you commit riyā every time you go to the mosque in front of people. Riyā is very bad. You need to stop going to the mosque. Start praying at home from now on until you develop that sincerity, and then go back to the mosque. Sounds like a logical thing to do, right? We're scared that we're going to commit riyā. We know we commit riyā when we go to the mosque. So shaitan tricks us into thinking, oh, we should stop going to the mosque until we purify our intention. Or for example, every time we give charity in public, we commit riyā. Shaitan will tell us, stop giving charity until you purify your intention. You don't want to commit riyā. Sounds like the right thing to do, but it's the complete opposite of what you want to do. This is a trick from Shaitan. He knows you're this close to